Welcome back to the Anarchy Analysis Prediction Series. We are back for week 2 of the LEC, and after a pretty eventful week 1, we've got 15 games on our big beautiful docket to predict today. I'm looking forward to it. We'll quickly jot ourselves over last weekend's results, and simply put, we got 6 out of 15. Week 1, as I said, was always going to be difficult to predict, with no real knowledge of how the teams had been performing on the current patch. We've now got some data, and we can kind of give them a little bit more of a understanding and breakdown as we head into today's predictions. And we're obviously going to be kicking it off with the match of the week, so let's get into that one. Today's matchup of the week focuses in on G2 and Heretics. I was tempted to just leave it at G2 because we all know the story about Heretics. It is G2 2019 plus Kaiser and Flackid. And you know, this roster, it's an interesting one to say the least. And it's an interesting reason to be covering them this weekend. Obviously, Jankos, been in the league for 600 plus games. He managed to reach that milestone last weekend. And here, his team's going up against G2. A team that was predicted to go 3-0 over the weekend, or last weekend. They ended up going 2-1, dropping a surprise game to Rogue, who, as we all know, underperforming. But hey, we know something, and I've got stats in front of me to kind of break down how teams have been playing. Heretics have been one of the average middling performers overall in terms of stats. They're not really dominant in anything when I had a look through them, but as I say, they're very good at being consistent. And after what I would consider an okay-ish weekend to kick it off, obviously they beat out Rogue, as well as beating, I do believe, day 3, they beat GX. So that's Giant X being defeated. And the reason I predicted Giant X to win last weekend over Heretics was I think that Heretics probably would have fallen behind in the top lane, and Odo kind of just pushed the advantage as he's done for so many years. That didn't come to fruition. Instead, it was just a very well-rounded and good performance out from Heretics. Now, their opponents are G2, which I think on paper are the strongest team this year. After week 1, we saw phenomenal play from them through the opening 2 games. They absolutely trounced BDS after a bit of a shaky start, but hey, my PC is making noises, nice. Anyway, essentially they did very well against BDS. Choppy start into an absolute dominant mid to late game. That's kind of been how though G2 has played. It was a similar story in their game against Vitality. Vitality, though, weren't as good as BDS, don't get me wrong, in day 1. But G2 absolutely crushed them. Day 3, we saw a bit of a shock. Rogue were just trying to survive lane and did so quite well. It just happened to be that as the game got later, Rogue controlled the objectives against G2 and shut them out of the game. Now, this weekend, going up against Heretics here, I think Jankos probably will try to play an objectives game. Kind of like what Markoon did. I think that style will do well against the G2 aggression, and it should shut them down. I think that possibly will come through from Jankos and Wunder and Perks, roaming about, setting up for objectives, and realistically speaking, if Kaiser gets his hand on Bard, yet again having more roam potential, this Heretic squad could do a lot of work against G2. That being said, it's G2. They're the only team that's been able to get Nocturne onto the Rift, and you have to think it comes out from Yike's champion pool. He's a very strong player. The fact that you kind of pull a ban towards Nocturne now, and don't get me wrong, Nocturne is considered a very strong pick in meta. He is, however, not very played by all the junglers except for Yike. I think he's probably one of the only players I would consider a good person to pick up the champ. But hey, that's just my thoughts, considering it's a G2-esque pick. Now, I think that will draw bans, and that will mean that picks like Ashe, Senna, Ashe, Lucian's also up there. These sorts of picks will make it through into the pick phase, and for some reason I feel G2 will just slam the Draven down there, and they'll play there, get Hans Sama to a very strong position, and he's untouchable sort of game style. That's my thought process on G2 Heretics, and it's going to be a fun one to break down overall when we get to it. So, my prediction is a G2 win. Let's move into Day 1's predictions. So Day 1, we're going to rattle our way on through till we reach Day number 3. We're going to go through 10 games right now. Hope you're ready, listening, and prepared, because this is going to be a pretty quick run through, and I'm just staring at my list. So, SK take on Heretics. I've gone with an SK win. Giants X takes on Carmine Corp. I've gone with Giants X. MDK all the way go against G2 in the third game of the day. I've gone with a G2 win. KC BDS take on Fnatic in the fourth game. I've gone with Fnatic. And to round out day number 1, it is Rogue Vitality. I've gone with a Rogue win. Day 2, SK BDS. I've gone with SK. Vitality G2. I've gone with G2. Heretics KC. I've gone with Heretics. Mad Rogue. I've gone with Mad. Fnatic Giants X. I've gone with Fnatic. Now we've rattled through them predictions. Let's get into the next set of games on day 3. So, day number 3 is kicked off with SK against Giants X. We get to talk about SK finally, and oh boy. No one really expected them to be 3-0 to start the league off, and I'm gonna be honest, when I looked at this SK squad, I thought they'd be middle of the pack. I thought mid lane, that is kind of an upgrade getting Niski in, but it kind of would come down to if the bot lane could step up, because Irrelevant has been overperforming for many seasons now, and he's finally at a position where he's probably considered the best top laner in the league. I think people sleep on him, however. Now, with Niski coming in, he's been known as a player to raise his team's strength. He brings his players around him up while he plays this more supportive setup style, and it's working well with this SK lineup. Exakick and DOS performing comfortably, doing quite well for themselves, and realistically speaking, SK are dominating the stats, and you've got to look at objective control for this SK lineup. They're up there with Rogue as the other team that are controlling these objectives and playing for them. And SK, though, have a better control of the game while getting these objectives. Essentially, they're able to push the advantage. Something that Rogue lacked in the first 2 games was securing an advantage for themselves, but not turning that into wins. And SK are the same, except they're turning it into wins. And you've got to think it's coming down to Isma and Niski. We're finally going to mention the jungler's name. Isma is very aggressive in his playstyle. He's been playing Rel in the recent game. I think whenever he had the opportunity to stun, He took that opportunity. Whenever he had a chance to crash down, he would do so. Even if it's literally a minute gap of a jump, he would take it. And that's the sort of aggressive, decision-making jungler you need when you're playing for objectives. Because you need to be able to push an advantage and deal with a dog barking in the background. That's always fun. But yeah, let's be honest. I like how SK have played this split so far. Teams will obviously have the same data I do, where they can look back, see how SK pushed the advantage. Because, well, adapting is possible over a weekend. When you have back-to-back-to-back games, you can't really change your style. You can see how the other teams play, but you can't necessarily adapt in about 6 hours between games. It's very hard to do. So I would say coming into a new fresh weekend, I think teams will be a lot more sussed out on how SK are playing, and realistically will try to shut them down. Do I think Giant X will be the team to do it? Not so much. I do think SK will win, but I'm really interested in that top matchup. We'll finally talk about it. Giants exit. SK have a very strong top lane now. So do Giants X. Odoamne, he's just, I would say, the other best top laner in the league for many years. This guy is weak side king. In the opening game for Giants X, he played safe, secured picks, and allowed Patrick to pull out Draven and just dominate through a bot lane game. Giants X really didn't need to facilitate to Odo, and he just played it smart, played his game, and did well. I think you may have a bit more of an issue with Irrelevant against him. I think a lot of pressure will come through SK onto him. But as a whole, Giant X, they've performed as I expected, I would say. Adequate is essentially the word I want to use. But I would say maybe a bit of an underperformance overall. It's just a little bit more of a, I would say they may miss out on playoffs this year from week 1's performance. But they are a coin flip-ish sort of style they've been playing. It's not really dominance, even though whatever stat I'm looking at is, I'm looking at Dragon percentage at 15. It's Giant X just behind Rogue. However, their TD, which is turret difference at 15 negative at the point, so they're always conceding. Similar story to Rogue, but we'll get to them in a bit. They are behind most of the early game, is the big thing. And while they're able to secure a decent amount of these Drakes, they're just not able to control lane. And I think that's something we've seen a lot from teams this year. It's objective control versus lane control. Some teams will focus the laning and push and punish that way. Others are trying to push through objectives, and it's not working. And they're suffering in lane because of it. And I think you kind of have to think how objectives are this year. The fact that you've now got one less Herald, but 2 more Rift spawns. You've got your same Drake spawns. There's a lot more objectives on the map, basically, for teams to play for. And it's weird that I don't have stats for Void Grub takes yet, for some reason. GOL doesn't have it, so I can't really point it out. But I think certain teams put a heavier priority on these to then snowball the push to get late game advantages. I think if I looked at Herald takes, Heralds per game, the surprising stat is Rogue have that. And I think that is the important thing to note is, sorry, SK have that. SK are trying to push for games. They're just taking the standing gold with towers, with obviously the Void Grubs being picked up to kind of facilitate the siege meta. This game has turned into a very heavy siege meta. I think with the fact that Caitlyn is rising in priority, I would say Ashe having the poke and harass to then begin siege raises the priority of siege. I feel we may end up seeing picks like Heimerdinger coming back into the meta and the fold. But yeah, we'll have to see. Teams are obviously slowly adapting to essentially what is the start of the season. And I will say this, I think this game probably will be an interesting topside test, as I've already mentioned. And I think if SK win and Irrelevant performs well, there should be no denying him as All-Pro top for the winter split. So, SK is my prediction here as we head into game number 12, technically, of the day. It's actually game 13 because we've already done the matchup of the week, but hey. MDK Mad Lions Koi take on BDS. Whew. Mad Lions came into the weekend on fire, let's be honest. Alioya with his bunch of rookies molded, crafted around him. It certainly looked good in week 1. We obviously did our VOD review of the Carmine Corp series, and let's be honest, I will have to say this as a means of breaking it down. Super, he's performing well. I would say he's facilitated not as much as other players, and he's still able to pick up advantages as the game gets late, into the later stages. Mad try to play an objective style, which is working out for them because they're translating it into their style. Mad have always been a team fighting team. So the fact they're getting objectives and still having the ability to team fight as they kind of seed pressure in lanes, it's certainly, I would say, fitting their obviously style so goddamn well, and I love how they've been playing. I do think though, when we look at obviously their games, the fact that they had SK week 1, a little bit more difficult because I don't think Merwin really was able to do much against, I believe it was Irrelevant Jax, which is a pick we've known for many years as being very dominant. Whenever he plays it anyway. But yeah, I would say that MDK are performing higher than expected. I'll also say that realistically speaking, Mad probably will make top 6. I'll also say BDS, their opponents, are slightly underperforming. Considering how well they did last year, the fact that they were runners-up in spring, and then summer did okay. I do believe they also made it to Worlds and had a very good run there. Yeah, they did. They were our 4th seed, and they did phenomenal because they made it all the way up into the round robin stage, the Swiss stage. But yeah, I'm slightly underwhelmed by them. they've not really done much or got me talking about them as they did last year. I generally think or haven't seen anything that's like, oh my god, BDS are phenomenal. Like, I think I switched off during their second game. I don't remember it. Having said that, they got 2 wins last week, and I was thinking they're underwhelming. I just haven't really been enthralled by their style. It's not the BDS that we came to love in 2023. It's a BDS squad who's there. And sure, they won 2, but I don't think they'll beat MDK. I think that MDK, while it's going to be an interesting test, I do believe that there's a massive jungle difference here. Elyoya versus Sheo, I hands down will always give it to Elyoya because he's just that much better. I'm going to quickly look at junglers this year, to be honest, at their, where is it, players, junglers in the LEC. If I look at KDA, Sheo is behind by 0.4. However, he's getting more kills than Elyoya, but Elyoya is setting up more for his team. He's playing more facilitative. He's farming so much less, and yet he's just playing more for the team than being selfish. And I'm pretty sure Sheo had a Graves game, didn't he? So that's maybe why the stats... Yeah, he did. He had inflated stats because he played Graves. Graves is just a farm champ. He's not a... I'm gonna play facilitative. He just farms and then does damage. So that explains a bit more as to why Sheo has more CSM than Elyoya. But realistically speaking, it is a small sample size. And I think the more facilitative jungler in Elyoya for his rookies is going to be so much better than how Sheo is. And yes, I really don't value Sheo's as a player in terms of his strength for the team. But certainly BDS do, and they've managed to get 2 wins, so what do I know? But yeah, I've gone MDK winning. Let's get into the next game, Fnatic versus Rogue. This is an interesting one, as I think everyone has thought that Larson has underperformed during week 1, which is kind of true in a sense of game number 1. He was very, very... well, he made a mistake that led to SK winning the game, basically. But as a whole, he's performed very well. He's top 2 mids, like in terms of stats. Damage percentage, 2nd. KP, 1st. GPM, he is 3rd. And realistically speaking, his CSM is 2nd. So, yeah, he may have tied lowest amount of average kills, but his assists per game are in 2nd place for the 3 games. I obviously read him a lot on X that people have thought he's underperformed. You can't really say that, considering the Rogue squad realistically has just done well in terms of objective control and then stagnated through the entire game, just riding a straight line basically, whereas the opposition have kind of just gone it's like, if this is early game, they've gone whoosh. As the game gets later, the opposition have managed to kill off Rogue and just balloon an advantage. They've kind of formed a snowball under the kind of blizzard that Rogue is. I wouldn't say blizzard, but I don't know how to describe how Rogue are, other than they've just had stagnant games where they've not really done much other than balloon their stats. I don't think they've really been aggressive. Whereas Fnatic, the other player who's in the top 2 for mid laners is Humanoid. He's having a very decent season overall in the 3 games. I would say he's honestly been up there. I'd say you've got Humanoid, Larson, and definitely Niski and Caps in that comfy pool of 4 mids that are doing very well for themselves. I just feel though here we're going to have a very interesting brawl between the 2 squads, and I do believe that the win will go to Fnatic. I think hands down the chaoticness that they'll bring to this game against a Rogue who's struggling to find footing will be where we see the winner happen. Is just punishment in lane and then bullying through to the late game, or no action at all and then Rogue just peter out to no success. I think we also have to look at the top lane. We unfortunately did get SK versus Fnatic week 1, and I was really looking forward to Oscarinin versus Irrelevant, and I couldn't really talk about it week 1. Obviously we kind of breezed through them games, but realistically speaking, Irrelevant is top in terms of performing top laners. Oscarinin is certainly in a close third, second place in terms of his performances. I definitely think the fact that he has showcased Cassante and the cheap tank items, and realistically being unkillable in his first game on stage in this split, I do feel he's done quite well against the rest of his opponents. It's just the fact he's going up against Shigenda, who I would say is underperforming. I would say he's probably one of the weakest parts of the Rogue lineup, considering the fact that Irrelevant has a... Why does he have the 21%? 21.5 KDA. Oscarinin's in third with a 4.2. Shigenda's at a 2.5. Shigenda has the second lowest amount of kills. You can kind of see why Rogue aren't winning, is they're just not killing. That's the simple truth about them. Shigenda has a decent amount of assists, tied with Oscarinin, but that's interesting is Rogue just farms. CSM matches to Fnatic. GPM though is favored to Oscar. Actually, I know I'm looking at Adam's stats. Oscarinin has better in terms of CS a minute as well as gold per minute. This, realistically speaking, kind of tells you the thing about Rogue is they just farm and don't kill, whereas you can quite clearly see Fnatic do. They get a lot of kills comparative to Rogue, and I think that will play dividends in terms of how this game will go, and it's kind of why I think Fnatic will win this game. Our final game this weekend is Vitality Carmine Corp, and because I don't want people like Upset to call me biased and think that I ride the dick of one of these teams, let's be honest, I'm gonna ask my phone to coin flip it. So heads, it is Vitality, tails is Carmine Corp. Okay, Google. Okay, Google. Flip a coin.
It's heads.
Well, there you have it. I'm going Vitality. The reasoning is I'm not a bias caster and I've got to follow the rules of the coin. What I will say is Vitality are there. I don't think that Carmine Corp have really shown anything in terms of strength in week 1, considering they lost all 3 games. Sure, they've got a very noisy crowd, but like, I think after the Mad Lions game, the fact they got shushed, the Fnatic fans were telling them to go home. Who did they play game to? Oh, G2. G2 fans are always loud, and they just shut them down anyway, because they weren't really shouting or screaming for their team. So yeah, that's kind of why I think that Vitality will win, is because the fans are less shit, and they're the better French squad. Anyway, thank you very much for joining me today. Yeah, you could tell I really could not give a crap about that last game, purely because I can't really predict a game between 2 teams that aren't really performing well. But yeah, that's it for today. All 15 games have got a prediction against them. If you enjoyed this, leave a like down below. Subscribe if you're new and if you want to, and I will see you guys on Tuesday again. Oh boy, I really love them days. See you guys then.
Never break, always fight, never quit, do it right, play the game, win it life, have no shame, there's no time, feel the pain, live the grind, I could change, in my mind, pick a lane, commit and climb, the only way to win it life, I never miss, that's fact,